Joining us now is Oji with stories trending around the world. Hello, Oji.
Good morning, Dr.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Very
Good
well.
morning, Oji. How are you?
How are you? I'm doing great. Well, good morning to you, viewers. We begin what's trending today in the U.S. Global philanthropist Melinda Gates has come under fire for comments she made over the possible fatality rate in Africa from the coronavirus pandemic. In an interview with CNN, Melinda warned that if the world doesn't act fast enough developing a vaccine for COVID-19, there will be dead bodies out on the streets of Africa, as there are on the streets of Ecuador. The philanthropist, who has visited several African countries and has donated enormously to health-related issues, also pointed out that slums in Africa will be more vulnerable to COVID-19. Let's take a quick listen.
You know, COVID-19, everybody, but affects people differently. We need a national response, and it needs to be equitable.
What was the moment like for you, Melinda, if there was one, when this hit you personally?
When I saw what China had to do to isolate such an enormous part of their population, my first thought was Africa. How in the world are they going to deal with this? I've been in townships all over Africa in slums. When we talk about in our country physical distancing and then hand washing, if you live in a slum, you can't physical distance. You have to go out and get your meal. You don't have clean water to wash your hands. And so as soon as I saw that, and we know from the foundation's work how quickly disease spreads, I thought, oh my gosh, we have a crisis on our hands that we aren't even talking about yet in the United States and the rest of the world.
That's how much worse it's going to be in the developing world.
It's going to be horrible in the developing world. And part of the reason you're seeing the case numbers still don't look very bad is because they don't have access to very many tests. So, you know, look at Ecuador. Look at what's going on in Ecuador. They're putting bodies out on the street. You're going to see that in countries in Africa.
Well, let's take some reactions. Many Nigerians on Twitter did not take her comment lightly. One user, Mike, wrote, "I see dead bodies all over the streets of Africa. Melinda Gates, horrendous vision from a horrendous lady with a horrendous husband. We reject it and we return it to sender. The agenda of Satan for Africa shall not stand. Those that have dug a pit for us shall fall into that pit." Another user, Galileo, wrote, "America has more coronavirus cases than all of Africa combined. Melinda Gates did not see any dead body on their streets yet, but it's Africa she's seeing dead bodies." Matthew 7:15, "Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are raving wolves." Another user, Victor, wrote, "Melinda Gates says the lack of testing kits in Africa is the reason our numbers are low, but soon we'll have dead bodies out on the streets. I'm sure Bill and his wife have rituals every night, hoping Africa gets affected the most. Hashtag Melinda Gates back to sender." Finally, a Dr. Maxi Vesha wrote, "Nigerians shall always choose blind faith over logic and reality. Melinda Gates just spoke the truth, and high probability it is. But Nigerians are dragging and rebuking her in the name of Jesus. Some same reason many still wouldn't stay home, because my Jesus is bigger than Corona."
Yeah, I mean, it's that entire back to sender sort of attitude, or I reject it in the name of God sort of attitude. I'm sorry to say, do we want to talk about how much money the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has invested into healthcare, water, sanitation, and hygiene in Africa? Do we want to talk about how much money they've invested into Africa for the COVID-19 fight alone of over $10 million so far, and still counting? At the end of the day, I do see how her comments could have looked condescending, but really and truly, quite frankly, I do think that she did speak a certain level of truth to what she actually said.
One, Melinda Gates was saying the truth. She's speaking from a position of knowledge.
Yep.
Under the auspices of the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, she's been involved in Africa, and she pointed out that she's visited many townships in Africa. So she has a knowledge of the reality in Africa in particular. And that's why she could refer to the fact that Africa has health infrastructure problem.
Yeah.
And if you look at the statistics on the testing capacity of various countries in Africa in the face of COVID-19, you will see very wide gaps. Even here in Nigeria, this morning, we have pointed out that we've not been doing enough testing. Even if we have 11 laboratories and we receive testing kits from JACMA and from, Chinese, the Chinese medical team that visited. Now, she talked about slums in Africa. Are we denying the reality of slums in Africa?
Physical
and the kind of cultural living spaces in which we have found ourselves? She talked about water supply. Water crisis is a global crisis, but it's even worse in the developing world. So what she said about Africa is in order. I mean, it could have been said by an African, and nobody would have said anything. So saying that she's insulting Africa, is just sentimental. Saying that Jesus Christ will protect us, well, that's a matter of faith. We're talking about science. But if we put all of this in context, you see that in the controversy around COVID-19 and what could have led to it, there is also what is called the Gates conspiracy theory.
Correct.
Many years back, Bill Gates, Melinda's husband, gave a TEDx lecture in which he reportedly predicted the coming of a pandemic. And the way people have twisted that now is to say, oh, Bill Gates knew about it. Oh, he wants to sell vaccines. Because he also had made a comment about people getting vaccinated. And they are trying to discredit the wonderful work that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has done around the world. What I would say to Melinda Gates is not to be bothered by whatever emotional reactions are coming from Africans. And those Africans are majorly Nigerians. And this is part of the problem that we have here. Nigerians talk a lot, but they don't base it on evidence. They don't base it on science. They like to talk emotionally and attribute everything to God. Yes, God is important, but let's follow science to solve this problem.
And the kind of science and technology, if you think about it as well, that the Gates Foundation has had access to over the years, it's because of the Gates Foundation that we were able to produce a heat map to help us to track and trace polio across Nigeria and eradicate it.
And so that interview, they're currently working on a vaccine for COVID-19. They're working diligently on that vaccine right now. And so, I know it's not like they're trying to insult Africa, or she was trying to insult Africa. I think her sentence was a little bit, could have been structured better. That's what I.
But she's a point-blank person.
She said it the way she said it, but it was
just talking about the developing world.
Saying that she sees dead bodies. She will see dead bodies.
She said because that's happening in Ecuador.
That's what. You're absolutely right. Well, I have a video showing how Ecuador is struggling with the outbreak right now. Let's take that video real quick.
El dolor humano no tiene factura, no tiene. Así vivimos nosotros los ecuatorianos y nadie nos representa, estamos solos.
Most families like Cesar had to keep their loved ones' bodies at home for several days after authorities became overwhelmed by the number of dead. To protect against the smell in this tropical city, coffins are wrapped in plastic for a final farewell. While authorities claim fewer than 200 deaths from coronavirus in the whole of Ecuador, the city's morgue was overflowing.
Esta es la realidad.
The mayor has now announced 2 emergency cemeteries in Guayaquil to cope with demand. Despite an early lockdown in February, videos by desperate families show a city in chaos.
Hemos tomado la decisión de enterrarlo.
Corpses kept in houses, on the street, some even abandoned.
What she was talking about, and that's the city in Guayaquil in Ecuador, and that's what she was
Melinda Gates is right.